Okay, this video is going to show Dreamcast emulation on a Raspberry Pi. I'm using Raspberry Pi 2 and I'm also using RetroPie 3.1, and you can probably tell from the background you've got the carbon theme rather than the previous simple theme for Emulation Station. So it's a relatively recent build, came out in early October 2015, and it's got a Dreamcast emulator within it. I'm going to show you how to set it up, how to run it, and how to tweak some of the configuration files. So as you probably know, Dreamcast came out about 98, 99. It was really popular, Sega's last console, and there's a very big following still for some of the games which are absolutely amazing, particularly Shenmue, which I think's got a third version coming out now on Kickstarter. But anyway, let's get into the emulation. On RetroPie, at the moment in 3.1, the Dreamcast emulator is an experimental set, so we install it slightly different, or use it slightly differently to the rest of the emulators. But all I've done here on the screen, before I've got to this screen, is expand the disk, configure a joypad, and do a standard overclock to the Pi. Besides that, it's stock, it's 3.1, so if you install 3.1, you should be able to follow this guide fairly easily. So the first thing we're going to do is install the Dreamcast emulator, because it's not actually on the image as it stands because of the experimental status. And the reason it's an experimental emulator section is because it's still been developed, not all the games run full speed, some of them have got issues, so it's definitely not something that is going to work 100% straight away with everything, so you've got to bear that in mind. It's not the sort of final product, if you like. So to install it, what we're going to do is use the inbuilt menu here. Now anything you do in this interface, I think I'm right saying pretty much anything you do here you could do from a terminal session anyway, but I'm going to use this interface this time just to make it maybe easier to run. I will drop into the terminal interface later to make some sort of finer tuned settings, if you like, but here is where we're going to install the Dreamcast emulator. So with the RetroPie menu selected, if you press A on your joypad and you get the menu popping up there, what we're going to do is run the RetroPie setup right down the bottom there. Now, like I said earlier, I have already gone into the Raspberry config and expanded the file system and also overclocked it. Without expanding the file system, you won't have enough room to put many ROMs on at all. And particularly with Dreamcast, you're looking at least probably, generally speaking, about 700 meg for every game. So it is a fair bit of space that you'll need. Okay, so we're going to RetroPie setup. Press A to select that, and you've got the menu up. Now what we're going to do, I'm not going to change any of these settings, I'm just going to go and install the Dreamcast emulator. If we go to experimental packages, which is number 4, and I'm going to press B to select that. Oh no, I'm not, I'm going to press A. Okay, and then I'm going to install Rycast. There it is. So there's the Dreamcast emulator that needs to be installed. The vast majority of emulators are already on the image, but this one, because it's in this section, you need to install it separately. So at the moment in this version of RetroPie, it happens to be menu item 1, 2, 3, but that could easily change, so don't pay too much attention to that. Just choose Rycast Dreamcast emulator. And one thing to note, it's not a RetroArch based, it won't be run with RetroArch, so the configuration files are slightly different, but I'll go over that anyway. So to install that, you just press A, and you can see on the screen there, it's trying to find the required files, and anything it can't find it download. So at this point you do need to have internet connectivity for your Pi, whether it's wireless, wired, as long as it can download some extra files. Now this process will probably take between 5 and 10 minutes, something like that. So what I'll do is fast forward the video to the end of this, and you can see what steps you need to take next. Whilst you're waiting for this to happen, it's probably worth looking at the wiki on RetroPie for the Dreamcast, and it's got some details there of how to use the BIOS, configuration files, general information. It's always useful to refer to the wiki when you're doing anything you haven't tried before. It's got some great info on there. So if you check that, and about 5-10 minutes, this should be completed, and we'll carry on from there. Okay, that's completed. Took about 6 or 7 minutes, something like that. And we're back at the menu where we were, and now we're going to quit out of this with if I go to the right, cancel, select A, and then you get a pop-up reminding you that for Dreamcast emulation to work, you must put the BIOS files in that particular directory, home, pi, RetroPie, BIOS. And I'll go over that in a second in the terminal view. But you do need those two files that it mentions there, dc_boot.bin and dc_flash.bin. Now you might find, depending on how you obtain your BIOSes, the dc_boot might be called dc_BIOS, but then you can just rename it _boot. But the dc_flash is likely to be that. There's various links on Google that will tell you how to rip the BIOS from your Dreamcast that you own. Okay, so that's everything done there. We're going to hit A to say OK, and we're going to go cancel, and it should take us back to Emulation Station. There we go. Now from this point I'm going to, actually I'll just press B to get back to that menu, and you might see already, depending on, no, okay. So as soon as we restart Emulation Station, you will see a Dreamcast menu straight away, and that's because there's a dummy file, if you like, already in there. As you know, emulator menu items don't show unless there's a file that Emulation Station can read. So as soon as you put a ROM there, you get the menu, and the Dreamcast one will appear as soon as you restart, but obviously you'd want to put a game in there as well. The extensions that Emulation Station recognises for Dreamcast are either .gdi or .cdi. So as long as you've got one of those in, it will detect the game. And I'll show you in the back end in a second. So now we're going to go to the command prompt, and you can do that by pressing F4, and it'll drop out of Emulation Station, and then you just tap another button on the keyboard within 5 seconds to stop it automatically restarting. But I'm going to swap the view, but I'll show you what that looks like here anyway. No, I won't, because I haven't got a keyboard plugged in. But if I did, I'd press F4 and cancel it. You could do it whilst Emulation Station is running. You could do it remotely with PuTTY, but I tend to quit Emulation Station anyway, just to make sure it's not affecting anything. Okay, so we'll go into the command prompt now. Okay, here we are at the command prompt. As a quick aside, I do have a new microphone, so it is useful if you could tell me if it's worse or better than the old one, just trying to make the audio a bit more clear. Maybe it's no different at all, which is fine, as long as you can hear okay. Right, so at the command prompt, what we're going to do is see what that installation just did for us. So we're just going to verify what's changed. Now I'm in my home directory here, and I'm going to change directory into RetroPie. Why isn't that doing that? There we go. Right, RetroPie, and in here I'm going to change to the ROMs directory. I'm going to list those. Now in the ROMs directory, and this is obviously where you put the games, there's a new folder called Dreamcast. Before we installed that new emulator, this folder wouldn't have been there, so you won't have it until you install that emulator, and that is where we put the ROMs. So we'll have a quick look in there. Dreamcast. Okay. So in there, like I say, this is part of the installation. It puts a dummy file, which isn't really there. It's just like a bookmark, if you like, for Emulation Station to read, because Emulation Station will see anything that's got .cdi, so it will see that file. And the purpose of that is so we've got a way to access the graphical interface of the emulator without having to run a game. So it just gets you to the menu system, if you like, of RiCast, the emulator, because as I said before, this isn't RetroArch based. So there are a couple of reasons why you need to get in there. So you can ignore the file, it's empty, it's nothing there anyway, it's just like a bookmark file. So don't try to remove it, it's quite useful. Okay, so that folder is where you put your games. You'll have a .cdi or a .gdi, put it in there. Okay, now what we'll also do is look at the BIOS directory, which is just back a bit. That's the one that we saw a moment ago when we installed it, and it reminded us to put some files in there. So this folder here, BIOS, is, let's have a quick look in there. By default, it's got several files in already, and that is where you'll put the extra files. What I'll do in a minute is copy some files across, and you'll see how I've done that and what I've done. But to get files across to this, just use a normal way that you usually use, whether it's Windows Samba folders or FTP across or USB stick, whatever you use. Just get the BIOS files and at least one game to try across there. Okay, Bear in mind, I think by default the Dreamcast was region locked, so if you put the North American or European BIOS in the folder there and then you try running a Japanese game, it probably won't work. So do bear that in mind if you don't get past like the boot screen, if you like. I think from memory, when the screen boots, you get either a blue circle logo for the Dreamcast or a red one, and the red one indicates Japanese and the blue one is American or European. I'm sure those of you who know Dreamcast inside out might correct me there, but basically it's different colour logo for the different areas. So make sure you get the right games for the right BIOS. Typically when you find the BIOS or you use your BIOS or you've got one at home, it'll probably be, I'm guessing I'm speaking to North American or European people, you'll want that type of ROM. So avoid the Japanese ones unless you've got a Japanese ROM. Well, we'll see how it goes in a minute. Okay, so that is the BIOS directory. Now, in addition to that, it's also created, if we change directory here to apt RetroPie configs, list that directory, we've got a Dreamcast folder. Again, that wasn't there before we installed it. So if we go in there, you can see we've got the standard emulators.cfg. Now we'll have a quick look in there, but it's basically just going to say run Rycast, you should think. There we go, yeah, there's only one, Rycast, and that's where it's been installed, and that's what it's a script as well, but we don't need to look at that. It will run Rycast, so there we go. Right, now what we'll do is check out the configuration file for it, because you haven't got a retroarch.cfg because it's not retroarch, so there's not really anything you'll do in this directory. What we do want to do is go back to the home directory, cd tilde, and in here there are various hidden files. You can see that with ls-lah, and the one we're interested in is this one. It's a hidden folder called Rycast. So we're going to go in there, and this is where its config is. Now this folder at the minute is empty except for a data folder. When we run a game or run the Rycast emulator, it will populate it with a couple of things. One is a emu.cfg file, which is the main configuration file. It includes controller settings and that sort of thing. It'll also populate it with a lot of VMU based files. VMU is the visual memory unit that Dreamcast had, basically how it saves games, and that's useful obviously if you want to try saving a game as you go along. There can be issues with the formatting of those VMU files, but I'll show you the fix that's been put in place to reformat those files to fix that, so the Dreamcast emulator thinks there is a proper save game option there. Let's just have a quick look in the data folder that is there. Okay, so these are in the data. When Rycast runs, it needs the BIOS, and it looks in this data folder for the BIOSes. But these two files are probably just symbolic links. So if we go, you can see there, whilst Rycast will look here for them, it will link to HomePie, RetroPie, BIOS, which is where we looked earlier, and it'll look for DC boot and DC flash. So you just make sure they're there. Now what I'll do is copy a game across, or a couple of games across. I'll copy the BIOSes across, and then we will just quickly revisit this these directories so you can see where they appear. Okay, so I copied a couple of files across, and we should be able to see now. If I refresh this directory, we have, there we go, it's no longer red, so it's this blue colour to say the files exist. I've copied dc_boot.bin and dc_flash.bin to the BIOS directory, and we can see that if I go to the home directory and choose the BIOS, list that, we've got here, there we go, dc_boot and dc_flash, and like I say, this BIOS that I've got here is the European version, I think. So I've made sure my games are PAL, just to make sure it's compatible. But I haven't experimented too much. Maybe the American ones work with that BIOS as well, but I've tried some Japanese games and they don't like this BIOS. They prefer me to put the Japanese BIOS in there, so that's where that is. Now just to confirm, if I go back to the configuration directory, which is apt RetroPie configs, usually for RetroArch emulation, if you look in the all directory, there is this folder, RetroArch joypads, and this is my joypad, and this is the file that RetroArch uses to find out what my inputs are. but that isn't used at all here because we're not using RetroArch. It's Rycast. It's a completely different emulator. So don't try configuring this file to make it work in Rycast. It's not going to be reading this at all. It's going to be back in its own directory, which we saw here. So that directory is home pi Rycast. Now at the moment, like you've seen, there's only a data directory here. We need to populate this with some of the configuration file and the VMU files, and I think the best way to do that is just to go back into Emulation Station. Now we've got the BIOS, and I've copied a couple of games across as well. We can generate these files, and it'd be easier to see that way. So we go back into Emulation Station. If you're doing this on your main display, you can just run the command Emulation Station, or if you're doing this remotely, just go back to the main screen and restart Emulation Station. And I'll just very quickly show you at the home directory the ROMs, and we're going to Dreamcast, and you can see that I've put, let's do that differently, there we go, I've put 3 games there: Crazy Taxi, Sonic 2 and Marvel vs Capcom 2, and they're all PAL versions, and they all end in .cdi, so Emulation Station will see them quite happily. Again, this is the null file, the non-existent file, but it's useful for Emulation Station to see that, to get into the main graphic. Okay, so let's go back into Emulation Station and see what we've got there. Okay, here we are back in Emulation Station, and now, because we put those files there, you've got a Dreamcast folder. Now even if you didn't put any games there, this would still show up because of that null file. So if we go in there now with A, you can see the 3 games I've put, plus you've got System Manager. The System Manager is used at the moment mainly just to reformat those VMU files, but I think if we go in there, I think this is the easiest way to generate the configuration file, so I'm going to try that first. Okay. Okay, there we go. Now because it's not run before, it's saying what's the time and date. You can set this with up, down. Now I haven't told it what the configuration of my joypad is or anything, but it's obviously worked out to a degree what the basic up, down, left, right select is on my joypad without me having to tell it. I am using a USB iBuffalo joypad, so it's fairly standard, so it's obviously fairly happy with it, but I do find that we need to tell it more specifically what some of the buttons are for the games. But for the moment, if I just say, yeah, it's the default, and then I'm going to press X on my controller, which I think is the Dreamcast's Y button. There we go, then we get, this is the basic Rycast interface, or it's the Dreamcast menu system, but Rycast is showing you this because there's no game. You haven't selected a game. And I'm just going to check whether anything's generated. Okay, so at this point it has already generated those files that I was looking for. So we can quit out of this and just go back and set some more configuration files for the controller. Or we could just try running a game, which I might try as well, but I'll show you that it doesn't get all of the controller buttons properly. Now whilst we're in this screen, the reason you want to go in here is to choose this file option that's selected here. Press Y on the Dreamcast or X on my controller, and here they've all got smiley faces, which is great, but if I choose one, this first one, and what you want to do if you get a memory card issue, there's an option here to, so there we go, so I pressed X there, and I'm going to delete all. So if you get a problem with a game saying, oh, this memory card isn't right, or there's a problem, come in here, press delete all, and it seems to resolve the issue. So I'll select all, say yes, delete everything, and I'll select a random icon for it in colour. Yep, that's fine. There we go, it's deleting it, and it's sort of reformatted it, and then it should be fine. Also, now I'm on this screen, I don't think I can exit this. Obviously I can choose back. Oh, hang on a sec. There, but I can't go back to Emulation Station from here. That's because I haven't configured my controller properly yet. So I'm going to restart this. But as soon as I do restart it, because I've already generated the files, I'm going to go back into the terminal control line, so command line. So just restart the Pi and get back to command line session, and we'll see what files have been generated. Okay, here we are back in the command prompt command line section, and what we're going to do is just check those files that the RetroPie emulator just generated. You can do that going back into that hidden folder, CD RetroPie, and we list the files. Let's do it like this. You can see before it was only data, and now we've got all the VMUs, which are the save game files basically, that we just reformatted as well. So, or we did that one there. You can see it's got a slightly newer timestamp, so it should make the emulator be quite happy to use them. So you know how to do that now. You can just reformat these files using that menu option, which is when you use the system name menu in Emulation Station. So, but this is the main one we're after, emu.cfg. Now you could just create it yourself and not let the system do it, but I think it's probably cleaner to do it this way. So we're going to make some changes in that emu.cfg file. Type nano emu.cfg, and in here we've got the default set up. Now I don't know what all of these settings, ta.skip, I don't know what that does, but you can obviously experiment. It looks like a lot of these are off or on, so 0 or 1, so you can tweak those. Dreamcast region 3 is probably Europe because I put that BIOS in there, but again, these are all probably quite tweakable. Here you can see the RetroPie has detected the name of my controller and put a load of blank entries for the buttons that it will recognise there. So that's the correct name. I'm going to leave that in the square brackets, and I'm going to edit these in a minute and put the right values in. So it goes down to about 30 odd. Don't know why it's chosen 30 odd, but there you go. And then you've got last couple of entries, RiOS, some sort of RetroPie operating system. I don't know what that does. Validate, open geochecks. I don't know what that does. So I'm not going to change any of this really, except for the controller details. Now on the wiki, again, there is an example of a PlayStation 3 setup there, and what I'll do, I'll probably paste that in here just to explain a few of the options. But first I'm going to get rid of these entries as they stand. They are what you need, so you do need to set something for button 0, button 1, or whatever your controller's got, but I'm just going to paste in the new entries, so it's a bit cleaner. So to get rid of lines, I think it's Control K. Yeah, so get rid of these. And I'm going to paste in first, I think, the defaults for the PlayStation 3 controller, which is, like I say, it's listed in the wiki what that one does. So if I put that there, you can see it's got some specific naming for the Dreamcast controller. And if you have a Dreamcast controller, you'll know it's got a D-pad, it's got an analog stick, it's got a start button, it's got buttons BA, YX for the 4 main buttons, and it's got 2 triggers at the back, a left and a right. So looking down this section, the buttons refer to what button the system sees your controller having. So this is effectively your controller really over on the left, the button numbers and the axis. And then on the right is what the RetroPie emulator will map that to. Now here you've got the start button, fine. Okay, so I'll choose the start button on my controller. You've got D-pad, up, right, down, left. You've got axis. Now, although axis sounds like it should be a directional button, it seems, at least when I've been trying this, the LT and the RT there refer to left trigger and right trigger, so that's actually the entry for the left trigger and right trigger. So if you've got some shoulder buttons on your controller, it'd be quite good to map them for that. I don't know what D-pad 2, left and right are. Maybe it's related to the analog element, I'm not sure. My controller doesn't have an analog controller, so I'm not going to be able to use that function with this. Then I've got the 4 buttons, YBAX, fine, I'll map that to 4 of my buttons. And then I've got quit as well, so there's not hotkeys in terms of the way RetroArch uses it, so you don't hold one and press another, it's simply a button. Now as the Dreamcast controller doesn't have a select key, I might use the select key on my controller and map it to quit and use it that way. And then lastly we've got the axis for, this seems to be what my D-pad wants, so my left, right and my up, down, which on my controller happens to be the same as this. The axis 0 is axis X and axis 1 is axis Y. And I'll show you how I map this. But I don't have or use a PlayStation 3 controller. I've got this USB iBuffalo, and I need to put the settings in for that. And to find the settings, what I tend to find easiest for this is to use the command jstest, and I'll show you how you can get your controller settings to map back to this. So if I quit out of this with Control X, no, I don't want to save it, but I do want to run jstest. First, quickly find what your joystick number is, and you can do that with listing dev input there, and you can see that, well, it's going to be a joystick, and mine is obviously this one because that's the only one there, JS0. So I know my joystick is detected by the operating system as JS0, and now I'm going to query it. So I'm going to type jstest, and I know I want JS0, so I put /dev/input, which is the directory it sits in, JS0, there, like that. Press enter. There it says my joystick is this, which yes it is, has two axes, X and Y, and it's got 8 buttons, and you can see here it's got axis 1, 2, which is 0 and 1, and then it's got 8 buttons, 0, 3 to 7. And if I press a button on the controller, you'll see them flash up there. Oh, I've got Emulation Station running and it's getting confused. But there, if I press buttons, you can see it go on and off. And same with the axis there. So you can find out when you're looking at your controller, you'll press whatever button it is, and you can see the button reference here. So on my iBuffalo, I'm pressing X, and that is flashing button number 2. So I know on my controller X is 2. Similarly, I know on my controller if I press start, it's 7. That's just popped up. So I can just note these down. 7 start, 3 2's X, etc, etc. For the axis, don't worry, it says minus 32,000 or whatever. That's just it's still axis 0 and 1. So X is left, right, and Y is up, down. But, yeah. Yours might be a bit different to that, but that's the basics to map what your buttons are. So when you've got, I'll cancel out that, Control C. When you know what your buttons are, we can go back into that emu.cfg file and edit it. So I'm going to edit emu.cfg. I'm going to get rid of the files that were here because I've noted down the format, so I know it's button dot and then the number and then equals. So I don't need to keep these. I'm just going to get rid of those. And for my iBuffalo controller, the best ones I've worked out so far are like this. I'll just copy them in. Okay. There. So I've only got, like I said, 8 buttons and a D-pad. So I've got 0 through to 7 and my axis. So what I've said is my button 0, which I think that was A, is button B on the Dreamcast. So I've mapped it to be in the same position as how the Dreamcast would appear. So I've got BA, YX, the 4 buttons. Then I've said for my triggers, I'll have the shoulder buttons, which on mine happen to be buttons 4 and 5 for my shoulder buttons, so that's left and right. 6, which is my select button, I've mapped to quit, so if I just tap select, I'll quit out of the game I'm in. 7 obviously start, that's my start button. And then I've put my axis for the D-pad, left, right and up, down. And that's it. I haven't got any more buttons, so I can't map anything else. There are some other options. For example, let's just quickly paste in that full one from the PlayStation 3. I'll just show you. It's a bit confusing because on the Dreamcast, I don't know what buttons Z, C and D are because I didn't think there were any more buttons. Obviously there's a start button and a D-pad, left trigger, right trigger. Like I said, I think that's maybe related to the analog stick. I don't know. Maybe that's relating to pressing the analog stick down or something. I don't know what those 3 are. Then you've got quit, which is optional obviously, and you've got the axis. So just map those to whichever buttons your controller is. I'll add mine to the wiki as well to help you out if you've got the same controller, but the principle is the same with all of them. Just find out what buttons you are and map it to the right menu item there. So I'll get rid of those, Control K. Okay. Right, and those ones there should do for my iBuffalo, and that's pretty much all you've got to do. I haven't tried changing these settings. I don't think I need to. It should just work okay now. So I'm going to quit without with Control X. Say yes, I want to save it. Press enter. That's it. And then I'll go back into Emulation Station, and we'll try again now. Okay, we're back in Emulation Station. Got the Dreamcast, and we've edited the controller file. So now it should understand what my start button is. Because whilst it automatically seemed okay with up, down, left, right, and maybe one of the buttons, now I've been specific and said, right, all those functions should be mapped to these buttons on my joypad, so you should be able to get a bit further. Now I've got 3 games. Now the performance on this isn't necessarily 100%, particularly the audio. It stutters a lot, but I'll run through them and see how it looks. So A to run a game, and we should see the BIOS screen sort of kick in, or the boot screen. The icon rather than a red one because of the BIOS I'm using. Okay, so I think this is pretty common on powered TVs because most of them were 50 Hz, but a lot started to support 60 Hz. But on this one, for some reason, I think you might need the analog stick to move across to 60 Hz and test Taxi, because for whatever reason I can't move across to choose a different option, which is a bit weird. But I can select 50 Hz, fine, press start, that's fine. Other games seems easier, but there we go. Right, now we're on this screen, and because we formatted the VMU earlier, this is quite happy to create a new file. If you hadn't done that, you might well have seen an error here that says I can't create a file, the VMUs aren't correct, but it's all fine. So I'm going to continue and press A, or the Dreamcast A, which is my B. So there we go, file saved. Okay, that's booted up. The audio is okay so far. Music, very flaky. It might be less annoying to play if you just disable the music somehow and keep the sound effects maybe? I don't know. Anyway, I'll press start. Okay, so like I said, I haven't got an analog button on my controller, but I have got left, right. You can see there we go, D-pad left, D-pad right, up, down doesn't seem to do anything, that's fine. Then I've got my A and B buttons, which is reversed for Dreamcast. You can see in the bottom right, I'm in drive mode. If I press B, or Dreamcast A, I've got reverse mode. Swap back with the A button, I've got drive, so flips between those two. X does, I don't know what that does actually. He's moving his arm, but I don't know what he's doing. Y, don't know what Y does. Oh, it makes him look or something. Does that make him move? No. Right, then I've got my triggers left. So left trigger is, I think that's revert, got his lights on. So that's brake, and right trigger, accelerate. There we go. So it does work. But as you can tell, the sound is really annoying. Okay, that was pretty horrific. I can do better than that. Let's try again. Okay, that stuttering music's obviously quite annoying, but it's playable. Anyway, get the idea. Playable, just audio's a bit iffy. Right, so because we mapped a quit button earlier to my select button, I should just be able to tap select and go back to Emulation Station. There we go. Okay, so let's try Sonic 2. Okay, I should be able to choose the 60 Hz one here. Yeah, it detects my left, right, fine on this one. Select that. And again, it's quite happy with the VMUs here, giving me the option to save a file. If it wasn't, it would say again, we can't save any files, the VMU isn't correct, but you've seen how to format that and fix that.
Sigma Alpha 2 heading due south over the city. We're en route. Everything's to go.
This is Control Tower. We have you on radar. Report cargo status of capture hedgehog. Over.
That's it.
Again, you've got quite bad stuttering on this as well. It plays pretty well in terms of speed. It doesn't feel too bad. It's just obviously the audio's really not great. There we go. What was if I exit there? Okay, and select back to Emulation Station. Last one, Marvel vs. Capcom. Now, this did get on the wiki. Someone said it runs pretty well. But again, I found audio issues are pretty bad, really, unless I'm missing a trick somewhere, but give it another go. Not so bad so far. It doesn't stutter too much in the intro, but I think in the game it gets a bit slower. There you go, that's Marvel and Capcom. It loads okay, but it doesn't seem all that playable to me. Maybe there's a difference in the US version or the Japanese version, maybe, but doesn't seem great at the moment. Okay, back to Emulation Station, and really that's it to get up and running. Pretty straightforward. You install it, put your ROMs there, and you can play it once you've maybe tweaked your controller setting a little bit. But it's worth trying different ROMs, see if which ones work better than others, and if you find one that's really useful, or even ones that don't work, it'd be great if you update the wiki to say like this one doesn't work at all, just to save other people trying it. But by and large, it's a great start for a Dreamcast emulator running on a Pi, and I'm sure with further development it'll get more and more reliable. Anyway, hope that video was useful to you. If it was, please click the thumbs up. If you've got any questions, either put it in the YouTube comments or put it in the RetroPie forums, and there's lots of people there who'll be able to help you. Yeah, thanks for watching.